The dark was not yet gone. It clung to the canyons, a deep, bruised purple, reluctant to yield to the coming day. Above the great mesas of the Arizona Territory, the sky lightened to a pale, cold gray. The year was 1875. Talon Redhawk sat motionless on his dun mare. Her breath was a soft white plume in the sharp air. His was invisible. He felt as if he had not truly drawn a breath in years. He watched the sun's first light touch the highest peaks. The light was clean. It was pure. It did not know the things men did beneath it. It simply came, as it always had. This was his ritual. He came to this ridge every morning. He watched the world be born again. He came here to remember and to be ashamed. Far below, the valley floor was a wound of red earth and fractured rock. The San Juan River was a scar, a silver thread of life winding through a land that seemed to despise it. The wind was the only voice. It whispered through the sparse, twisted juniper and the bitter sagebrush. It carried the scent of dust and time. This land was not forgiving. It was raw. It pared a man down to his essentials: bone, muscle, and memory. It promised a brutal heat by noon and offered only a shivering cold before the dawn. Talon was a man of 32 years. He was dying, the people. He had been born of the Red Running into the Water clan. Now, he was nothing. He was a shadow living in the cracks of the world. He wore buckskins, faded by the sun and softened by wear. They were the color of the earth. He wanted to blend in. He wanted to disappear. He had worn blue once, the brass buttons, the scratch of the wool. He had been a scout for the United States Army. He had been young. He had believed the words of the white officers. He had believed in peace. He had believed a bridge could be built between his world and theirs. The bridge had burned. He had watched it burn. Now, he carried the cry of his ancestors. It was not a sound, but a weight. It settled in his chest, heavy as river stone. It was the whisper of the long walk. It was the silence of the canyons after the bluecoats rode through. It was the faces of the children he had failed to save. His guilt was a living thing. It rode with him. It slept beside him. He had not just been a scout. He had been a good one. He knew the canyons. He knew the hidden springs. He knew the ways of the land. He had shared this knowledge. He had shared it for their coin. He had shared it for their promises of protection for his own small band. The promises were lies. They were smoke on the wind. The massacre at Canyon de Chelly. He had not been there. He had been sent on a false errand, a decoy mission to the north. When he returned, there was only silence. And Ash, the soldiers, the men he had shared coffee with, had followed his own maps. They had trapped them. They had destroyed the peach orchards. They had slaughtered the sheep. They had ridden down women and children. His captain, a man named Thorne, a man with eyes like chipped ice, had called it effective policy. He had called it subduing the hostiles. Talon had looked at the man. He had seen the truth of their world in those cold eyes. There was no bridge. There was only conquest. He had walked away. He had dropped his rifle at the captain's feet. He had walked out of the fort, expecting a bullet in his back. None came. They let him go. He was just an Indian. One less mouth to feed. One less problem to solve. He had become a recluse. He could not return to his people. He could not bear the shame. He could not look into the eyes of the widows he had helped create, and he would never again stand among the white men. So he lived here, in this high, lonely valley. He built a small cabin from rock and juniper logs, hidden in a box canyon. His only companions were his mare, a tough, intelligent animal, and a three-legged dog he had found starving near the river. He hunted. He trapped just enough to trade for coffee and salt. He spoke to no one. He was a ghost. He was a man waiting for an end. The world he avoided was a cauldron of greed and violence. The war between North and South had ended, but other wars continued. The war for gold, the war for silver, the war for land. This was the frontier, It was the edge of the civilized world, and civilization was a thin, cracked veneer. Underneath, it was animal. It was the law of the jungle. In the towns, places like Durango and Prescott, justice was a commodity. It was bought by the man with the heaviest purse. It was enforced by the man with the quickest draw. A man's life was worth less than a good horse. A woman's honor was a joke told in saloons. Money, guns, and men. They were the trinity that ruled this land. Men flooded in, broken by the war, running from their past, or seeking a future that could only be built on the bones of others. They ripped the earth open for silver. They strung wire to claim grasslands that had been open for 10,000 years. They brought whiskey and disease, and they brought their laws. The law that said an Indian was a savage. The law that said a woman was property. Talon had seen it. He had lived it. He had no faith in their laws. He had faith only in the sun, the rock, and the certainty of his own regrets. Miles away, hidden in a dry arroyo, a woman shivered. Her name was Clara Whitfield. She was 23 years old. She was the daughter of a preacher, a man who had been filled with more fire and brimstone than common sense. He had brought his faith and his daughter to the godless West, seeking to save souls. He had found only pneumonia. He died in a dusty tent outside Flagstaff, his last words a curse on the land. Clara was left alone. She was pretty. She was young. She was terrified. In this world, that was a dangerous combination. She had traveled, looking for work, for safety. She found neither. She found the Red Creek mining camp. It was less a town than a festering sore on the side of a mountain. Hundreds of men, brutalized by the work, lived in tents and crude shacks. They dug silver from the earth. They drank their pay. They fought. They died. The camp was owned, body and soul, by one man, Wyatt Slade. Slade was not a man of God. He was a man of appetites. He was large, with a thick neck and small, wet eyes that missed nothing. He ran the mine. He ran the saloon. He ran the sheriff. He saw Clara serving watered-down coffee in the camp's only cook tent. He decided she was what he wanted. He did not court her. He informed her. He had called her to his office, a plank board room that smelled of stale cigars and sweat. He told her she would be his wife. He said it would be a good life for her. He would give her dresses. He would give her a house. Clara had looked at him. She saw the bulge of his stomach. She saw the casual cruelty in his smile. She smelled the whiskey on his breath at 10 in the morning. She had been raised to be meek. Her father had taught her that a woman's voice should be soft, that her will should bend to God, and to the men God placed over her. But this was not God. This was a monster. When she hesitated, his smile vanished. He had grabbed her wrist. His fingers were like steel bands. He told her it was not a request. He told her the wedding would be in 3 days. He told her she had no choice. He owned this camp. He owned everyone in it. He would own her. The fear was so cold, so sharp. It cut through the obedience. It found something else, something hard and small and desperate. 2 nights later, she had fled. She took nothing. She stole a loaf of bread and a canteen of water. She ran into the desert. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she was running from him. She had been running for 3 days. The bread was gone. The water was gone. Her shoes were shredded. Her feet were bleeding. She was starving. She was lost. She was hiding in this gully, shaking, convinced she would die here. She would die, or he would find her. She did not know which was worse. This was the world Talon Redhawk hid from. This was the world that was, even now, stumbling toward his isolation. Back on the ridge, Talon turned his mare. The sun was higher now, casting long, sharp shadows across the valley. The air was still. It was too still. A hawk circled high above, a speck against the vast, empty blue. He felt the change. It was a tightness in the air. It was the way the silence felt, not peaceful, but waiting. He was a man defined by his solitude. His walls were high. They were built of grief and rock and distance. Clara was a woman defined by her terror. She was running toward anything, toward any hope, no matter how small. The atmosphere of the high desert was one of immense, profound loneliness. It was a quiet that could deafen a man, but beneath that quiet, the ground was humming. A storm was building. 2 lives, 2 broken pieces of a fractured world, were moving toward each other, drawn by a fate as old and as unforgiving as the Red Land itself. Talon urged his mare forward, down the narrow game trail toward the river. He needed to check his traps. He needed water. He moved with the silence of a hunter, his eyes scanning the rocks. He was unaware. He was a man steeped in his own past, walking toward a future he could not imagine. He carried the cries of his ancestors. He did not know he was about to meet the cry of the living. The sun had moved. It had crossed its high, merciless peak and was beginning its long slide toward the west. The heat promised at dawn had arrived. It baked the red rocks until the air above them shimmered. Talon had finished checking his traps. 2 rabbits. It was enough for a few days. His water skin, however, was nearly empty. He led his mare down the final, winding game trail toward the San Juan River. He loved the river. It was the one place in this valley that felt truly alive. It was wide here and shallow in the late summer, running clear and fast over stones of jasper, quartz, and deep green slate. A thick line of cottonwoods lined the banks, their leaves a sharp, sudden shock of green against the overwhelming red of the territory. It was quiet. The only sound was the constant, soothing rush of the water and the dry buzz of insects in the heat. He left the mare tethered in the deep shade of the trees, where she could drink. He took his water skin and walked toward the bank, his moccasins making no sound on the soft, damp earth. That was when he saw her. She was at the water's edge, perhaps 50 yards downstream, half hidden by the curve of the bank. She had her back to him. She was kneeling, scrubbing at a piece of cloth in the current. Her dress, a dark, plain calico, was soaked through. It clung to her. Her shoulders were shaking. Talon stopped. He did not move. He did not breathe. He was a man who lived by not being seen. His first, sharpest instinct was to fade back into the trees, to circle wide. This was not his business. This was a white woman, and a white woman. Alone in this land was a particular kind of trouble. She was a story that almost always ended with a rope, a posse. It ended with his body hanging from one of those same green cottonwoods, accused of whatever crime she chose to name. He knew their justice. He had seen it, but she was shaking. It was not just from the cold of the river water, which was fed by mountain snows. It was a deep, racking shudder that ran through her whole body. He watched for a long, still moment. She was small. Her hair, a brown color like damp earth, was plastered to her neck. She stopped scrubbing. She put her face in her hands. Her cry was lost in the sound of the river, but he saw the convulsion of her body. It was the movement of absolute despair. This was not just trouble. This was a creature in a trap. He knew that shape. He watched her. He saw the ghost of his sister in her small, hunched frame. He saw the women of his clan, weeping by the ashes of their homes. This was a different skin, a different language, but the pain was one he knew. It was the pain of the hunted. He could not walk away. He could not, and still call himself a man, a Dine. He stepped out from the trees. He did not try to be silent now. He walked slowly, openly, letting his feet crunch on the gravel of the riverbank. He wanted her to hear him. He did not want to startle her. He failed. She heard the crunch of stone. Her head snapped up. She spun around, scrambling to her feet in a single, panicked motion. Clara saw him. He was tall. He was an Indian. His face was hard, carved from the same red rock as the canyons that surrounded them. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather strip. He wore buckskins, the color of the earth. He was armed. A rifle was slung on his back. A knife was at his hip. Her heart stopped. It simply seized in her chest. She had run from one predator straight into the arms of another. This was it. This was her father's worst sermon made real. The savage in the wilderness. The heathen. She expected a yell, a war cry. She expected him to rush her. She expected the final, brutal violation before death. All the stories she had heard in dusty parlors and around campfires flooded her mind, stories of capture, of torture, of things worse than death. She braced herself for it. The afternoon sun was hot on his back. It struck the river behind her, shattering into 1,000 points of silver light. It was blinding. She raised a hand, shielding her eyes, which were already red and raw from crying. Talon stopped about 10 feet away. He held his hands open, palms forward and away from his weapons. He saw the terror in her eyes. It was a feral, cornered look. He had seen it in deer just before the kill. It was not a look he enjoyed. He kept his voice low. It was rough from disuse, but steady. "You ain't alone no more." He said it simply, a statement of fact. The words meant nothing to her. They were just sounds. All she saw was the man, the weapons, the terrible, complete isolation of the riverbank. "Stay back," she whispered. Her voice was a cracked, dry thing. "Do not come closer." Her free hand fumbled at her waist, in the folds of her wet skirt. She pulled out a small knife. It was a paring knife, the blade barely 3 inches long. It was useless, pathetic, but she held it out, her hand trembling so violently she could barely aim the point toward him. Talon looked at the knife. He looked at her. He saw the starvation in her face. He saw the dark, bruised circles under her eyes. He saw the way her soaked dress revealed how thin she was. She was a skeleton draped in wet cloth. He did not move closer. He unslung the rolled pack from his shoulder. He kept his movements slow, deliberate, with no sudden gestures. From it, he pulled a thick woolen horse blanket. It was worn, but clean. He held it out. "The water is cold," he said. "You are shaking." He took 1 step forward and tossed the blanket. It landed softly on the stones at her feet. She flinched, pulling the knife back, as if expecting the blanket itself to attack her. "I do not want anything," she said. Her teeth were chattering, making the words clip. "I have nothing, no money." "I do not seek money," Talon replied. He gestured to the blanket. "Take it. The sun is strong, but the wind has teeth." She stared at the blanket, then back at him. Her mind was racing. Was this a trick? A prelude to something worse? "Why?" she whispered. It was a genuine question. "Why are you helping me?" He considered this. His gaze was steady. "The land does not care if you live or die," he said, his voice flat. "Today, I do." This simple, strange answer confused her. He was not trying to soothe her. He was not making promises. He was just stating facts. But she was so cold. The wet calico felt like ice against her skin. Slowly, never taking her eyes off him. She bent her knees and snatched the blanket from the ground. She pulled it around her shoulders. The thick wool was a shock. It was heavy. It was warm. It smelled of horse and wood smoke, and man, it was real. The sudden warmth made her shiver harder. A new wave of sobs threatened to overwhelm her. As she pulled the blanket closed, her wrist was exposed. The wet sleeve had fallen back. Talon saw it. His eyes narrowed, just a fraction. It was a raw, red abrasion, circling her entire wrist. It was a rope burn, a fresh one. He looked at her other wrist. He could see the matching mark. His gaze lifted to her face. He saw the fading yellow of a bruise high on her cheekbone and a small, scabbed cut on her lip. His expression did not change. He did not move. But the air around him grew colder. He had seen these marks before. On prisoners. On slaves. He understood. She was not just lost. She was cargo. She was property that had escaped. He did not ask who did it. He did not ask why she was here. To ask was to make her relive it. And he knew The why was always the same. Greed, power, men. He only said, "You are hurt." Clara looked down at her wrist as if she had been stung. Shame flooded her, hot and bitter. She pulled the blanket tight, hiding the mark. "It is nothing." Talon looked up at the sky. He had been watching it. The wind had shifted. In the high desert, the weather turned like a striking snake. An hour ago it was clear. Now, dark. Heavy clouds were rolling in from the west, swallowing the sun. The air smelled of ozone and wet dust. A fat, cold drop of rain hit the stone beside him, then another. "The sky is opening," he said. He nodded up the bank, to a dark fissure in the rock face, screened by a tangle of old junipers. "There is shelter. A cave." Clara hesitated. The riverbank was open. He was right, but a cave. To be enclosed with this man. A roll of thunder cracked overhead. It was not a distant rumble. It was a sharp, splitting crack that echoed off the canyon walls like artillery. The sky tore open. It was not a gentle rain. It was a deluge. A cold, driving sheet of water that turned the air gray. In seconds, they were both soaked. "Come," Talon said. It was not a request. He turned and walked toward the rocks. He did not look back to see if she was following. He expected her to have the sense to survive. Clara stood frozen for a heartbeat. The rain was stinging, hammering her. The woolen blanket was already growing heavy with water. She looked at the raging river. She looked at the man's retreating back. She ran after him. The cave was not deep. It was a hollow in the sandstone, carved by ancient winds, or perhaps a long-gone stream. It was dry. It smelled of dust and old animal dens. It was barely large enough for two people and his saddle roll. She was trapped. The space was no bigger than a wagon bed. He was between her and the rain. If he meant her harm, he could do it here, and no one would ever hear her scream. Talon entered and dropped his pack. Clara hovered at the entrance, water dripping from her hair, clutching the heavy, wet blanket. She was still holding the little knife. "In," he said, moving to the back of the small space. "You will not dry in the wind." She crept inside. The sound of the rain was a deafening roar outside. A solid wall of water. Inside, it was suddenly intensely quiet. There was only the sound of their breathing and the drip of water from her clothes onto the sandy floor. Talon ignored her. He opened his pack. He worked with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic. He took out a small bundle of dried tinder and kindling he always carried in an oilskin pouch. He took out a flint and steel. He found a circle of old, blackened stones near the cave mouth. Someone else, long ago, had sheltered here. He knelt. He struck the flint against the steel. A spark. Another. A spark caught the dry tinder. He bent his head and blew on it. A long, steady breath. A small, fragile flame appeared. He fed it tiny sticks, then larger ones from his kindling. In minutes, a small, clean fire was burning. Clara watched him. His movements were precise, unhurried. He was not looking at her. He seemed uninterested in her. He was focused on the task, on bringing warmth to the cold, damp space. This was not the behavior of a man about to attack. This was the behavior of a man surviving. The fire caught. The light flickered, pushing back the shadows. It threw their shapes onto the curved walls of the cave. The warmth radiated out. It touched her face, her hands. It felt impossibly good. She realized she had not felt true warmth in days. He was an Indian, a warrior. She had been taught to fear his kind. They were savages, heathens. But the man who had tied her, Wyatt Slade, he had offered her silks. He had offered her a house. He was white. He was civilized. He read the stock reports and owned a gold watch. And his touch had been like spiders. His breath had smelled of whiskey and rot. This man, this savage, offered her only a blanket and a fire, and his hands were steady and clean. He sat back on his heels. He was still, He was as still as the rock around them. "My name is Clara," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper above the roar of the rain. Talon turned his head. The firelight caught the planes of his face, making the shadows deep. It danced in his dark, unreadable eyes. He saw the fear was still there, but it was being challenged. Something else was present: exhaustion, curiosity. He saw the knife, still pointed loosely in his direction. He gave a slow, measured nod. "Clara," he repeated. He tested the name. It felt foreign on his tongue. He turned back to the fire. He pulled 2 strips of dried rabbit meat from his pack. He skewered one on a stick and held it toward the flames. He offered the other, the raw, dry piece, to her. She stared at the dark, tough-looking meat. "Eat," he said. "It is not much, but it is something." Her stomach cramped with a hunger so profound it was painful. She had not eaten in 3 days. She looked at the knife in her hand. It was absurd. She was starving, freezing, and she was threatening the only person who had offered her aid in... She could not remember how long, and he was not afraid of her knife. He was simply waiting, slowly, agonizingly. She lowered the knife. She placed it on the sandy floor beside her. She reached out with a hand that trembled and took the strip of meat. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was warm. She pulled her hand back as if burned. He did not react. The tension in the cave did not break. It just shifted. It became something new. Outside, the rain hammered the earth, turning the riverbank to mud. Inside, the small fire crackled. The light flickered in his eyes. It reflected in the tears that began to slide, silently, down her face. They were not tears of terror anymore. They were tears of exhaustion. He took his own piece of meat and held it to the fire. He ate. He watched the flames. Clara watched him. She ate the meat. It was salty and tough, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted. The strength of it hit her stomach like a jolt. A fragile, trembling truce had been formed. A single thread of trust, thin as a spider's silk, stretched between them in the shadows of the cave. It was a beginning. The rainstorm was as violent as it was brief. It passed as the sun died, leaving the air washed clean and smelling of wet sage and juniper. The sky to the west was a bruised, fading streak of orange and purple. The river, which had been clear, was now a muddy, churning brown, swollen with the runoff from the high country. They did not speak. When the last drops had ceased, Talon rose. He kicked dirt over the fire, scattering the embers until nothing remained but blackened stones and steam. He picked up his pack. He looked at her. "We go," he said. Clara stood up. The heavy wool blanket, though soaked, had kept the core of her warm. She was still holding the dried meat. "Go where?" "My home. It is not far." He did not offer it as a choice. He turned and ducked out of the cave. She followed. Her wet dress was a cold, heavy weight. The rocks were slick. The path he took was not a path at all, but a scramble up the side of the arroyo. Using holds she could barely see, he moved like a shadow, his balance perfect. She slipped, her torn shoes finding no purchase. He did not turn, but his hand appeared. His arm braced. She took it. His grip was like stone. He hauled her up onto the ledge without effort. He led her to his mare, who stood patiently in the shelter of the cottonwoods, her coat dark with rain. He swung up onto her back in one smooth motion. He looked down at Clara. "Come," he said again, offering his hand. She hesitated for only a second. The alternative was to stay here, in the growing dark, by the flooding river. She placed her hand in his. He pulled her up, seating her in front of him, her back against his chest. Clara went rigid. This was more intimate than any touch she had ever known. She could feel the solid warmth of his body through her wet dress. She could smell the smoke and the rain on his buckskin shirt. He was all muscle and bone. She was trapped between his arms. He made no sign that he noticed. He nudged the mare with his heels. and the horse moved forward, picking her way through the slick mud and stones, away from the river, and into a narrow, winding canyon that was invisible from the bank. They rode for what felt like an hour, in a silence broken only by the click of the mare's hooves on rock. The canyon twisted, turned, and seemed to end in a solid wall of rock. But Talon guided the horse through a screen of old junipers, and the walls opened up. It was a small, hidden valley, a box canyon, perhaps 20 acres across, with sheer red walls on 3 sides. It was a perfect fortress. A small stream, fed by a spring, ran through the center. There was grass, and in the deepest part of the shadow, built against the rock wall itself, was a cabin. It was small, made of stone and dark, weathered logs. A thin curl of smoke rose from a stone chimney, meaning he had left a fire banked. As they approached, a sound came from the darkness, a low, warning growl. A dog limped out from the shadow of the porch. He was old. His fur was a matted gray, his muzzle white. One of his front legs was missing, the joint healed over long ago, but his teeth were bared, and his one good eye was fixed on Clara. "Hush! 3 legs!" Talon's voice was low, and the dog's growl instantly subsided. He sat, thumping his tail once on the dirt. He was watching his master. Talon swung down from the mare. He stood for a moment, letting the horse rest. Then he looked up at Clara. He did not offer his hand this time. He just waited. She slid down, her legs trembling when they hit the ground. The dog limped over. He sniffed her wet skirt. Clara froze, her hands clenched. The dog looked up at her, then gave another soft, welcoming thump of his tail. He licked her hand. Talon watched this. He nodded, as if a decision had been made. He smells your fear. He does not smell malice. He led the horse to a small, lean-to stable. Clara stood alone in the center of this hidden place, the old dog leaning against her leg. She felt as if she had fallen off the edge of the world. Talon returned. He did not pause. He pushed open the heavy plank door of the cabin and went inside. She heard him strike a match, and the yellow light of a lantern bloomed from within. He did not call for her. He simply left the door open. She took a breath. She followed. The cabin was one room. It was painfully clean. The floor was packed earth, swept bare. A single cot, covered with furs, was against one wall. A small, blackened stove was against the other, beside a rough-hewn table and 2 stools. There were no pictures, no books. There was only a rifle on a wooden peg, a few iron pots, and the smell of wood smoke, coffee, and dried herbs. It was the cell of a monk. "You are wet," he said. He was standing by a small chest. "You will be sick." He tossed a bundle of cloth onto the cot. It was a man's linen shirt, worn soft, and a pair of buckskin leggings. "They are all I have. They will be large, but they are dry. Change." Clara stared at the clothes. "Where?" He gestured to the corner, where a blanket hung from a rope. Shielding a small area, he turned his back to her, busying himself at the stove, adding wood to the embers. His back was a solid wall. He was giving her privacy. She hurried behind the blanket. Her fingers were numb and clumsy, fumbling with the tiny buttons of her wet bodice. She stripped off the cold, clinging calico, her shift, everything. She stood naked and shivering in the dark corner. She pulled on his shirt. It fell to her knees, vast and soft. The leggings were impossibly large, but she pulled them on and tied the rawhide string at her waist as tight as she could. The dry clothes were a blessing. She stepped out. He did not turn. "Sit," he said, nodding to one of the stools by the fire. She sat. He was moving, taking things from a shelf. He had a small wooden bowl and a strip of clean linen. He placed a handful of dried, crushed leaves into the bowl and added a few drops of hot water from a kettle on the stove, stirring it into a dark, fragrant paste. He came to her. He knelt. Clara flinched. He stopped. "Your wrists." She looked down. The rope burns were raw, an ugly, weeping red against her pale skin. She slowly, fearfully, held them out. He did not look at her face. He focused on the wounds. His touch was not gentle, not in the way her mother's had been. It was impersonal. It was firm, steady, and efficient. It did not hurt. He smeared the green poultice over the burns. The effect was immediate, a cool, drawing sensation that pulled the fire from her skin. He took the linen and tore it into strips, bandaging both wrists with quick, practiced movements. "This is yarrow," he said, his voice quiet. "It will stop the bleeding and clean the wound." He looked at her face. "Your lip?" She had forgotten the cut. He dabbed a tiny amount of the same paste onto it. His finger brushed her skin. It was the first time he had touched her face. She held her breath. He drew back, his work done. He rose and went back to the stove. He took a pot, added water, and began adding things to it. The rabbits he had caught. He cut the meat with his knife, his movements economical. He added wild onions, dark roots, and a pinch of salt. Soon, the cabin filled with a rich, savory smell that made Clara's stomach ache with a desperate, cramping hunger. He was a warrior. She had seen the knife at his hip, the rifle on the wall. She had seen the way he moved, but he was tending to her wounds. He was cooking her soup. He was kind. The simple, quiet kindness was more disorienting than violence would have been. She did not know what to do with it. He ladled the hot soup into a wooden bowl and handed it to her, along with a horn spoon. He poured a mug of black, bitter coffee and placed it on the table. He took his own portion and sat on the other stool. They ate in silence. The soup was hot. It was real. It spread warmth through her limbs, pushing back the deep, systemic cold that had lived in her for days. She ate, and for the first time, she did not feel hunted. She felt safe. The realization was so overwhelming, she nearly wept into the bowl. When she was finished, he took the bowl from her. He gestured to the cot. "Sleep, you are safe here." "Where will you sleep?" she whispered, looking at the single bed. "On the floor, by the fire." He laid out a buffalo hide and his own horse blanket. "This was too much. No, I cannot. That is your bed." He looked at her. His gaze was not unkind, but it was absolute. "I will not argue with you. You are hurt. You are weak. Sleep." Clara knew that tone. It was the end of the discussion. She climbed onto the cot. The furs were soft, smelling of smoke and the clean, dry scent of the man who owned them. She lay down, pulling another blanket over her. She was exhausted, but her mind was still racing. She watched him. He checked the bar on the door. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, his rifle laid across his knees. He was guarding her. She closed her eyes. She fell asleep. She woke hours later. The cabin was utterly dark, save for the deep, pulsing red glow of the embers in the stove. The wind was high outside, moaning around the corners of the cabin, a lonely, high-pitched sound. She heard another sound. It was in the room with her, a low, rhythmic chant. She sat up, her heart pounding. She clutched the fur to her chest. He was sitting, not on the floor, but on the stool, facing the dying fire. His rifle was gone. His hands were resting on his knees. He was praying. The words were in his own language. It was not like any sound she had ever heard. It was guttural, yet soft. It was filled with long vowels and quiet consonants. It sounded like the wind. It sounded like the river. It was not a prayer of supplication, of begging. It sounded ancient. It was a song of the earth, of the night. It was sacred, and it was deeply, profoundly sad. She watched him, this man who was a mystery, a savage who had bandaged her wounds, a heathen who was praying with more reverence than her father ever had. He finished. The last note of the chant faded into the sound of the wind. He did not move. He sat in the darkness, perfectly still. The safety she had felt earlier returned, settling over her like the blanket. The soup, the bandages, the prayer. He had not asked her a single question. He had not demanded to know who she was, or why she was here. He had simply helped. She owed him the truth. He deserved to know the danger he had brought into his home. "His name is Wyatt Slade," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the small, dark room, it sounded like a shout. Talon did not turn. He did not jolt. He simply inclined his head, a fractional movement, letting her know he was listening. "He runs the mining camp at Red Creek." She spoke to his back, to the shadows. "My father died. I had no money. I went there. I was working in the cook tent." She told him about Slade, the small, wet eyes, the room that smelled of cigars, the proposal that was a command. "He grabbed me," she whispered, and her hand went to her wrist, feeling the bandage. He told me I had no choice, that he owned everyone, that he would own me. The wedding was in 3 days." She stopped. She was shaking again, but not from cold. "I ran. 2 nights ago. I stole bread and ran into the desert. I did not know where I was going." Talon remained silent. He was listening. He was a stone wall, absorbing her words, her pain. "He will not let me go," she said, her voice cracking. "He does not like to be defied. He has posted notices in all the towns. A reward." She took a ragged breath. She had to say the last part. He had to know. "For me, for my return, $100. She choked on the number. The notice says, anyone finds her, living or dead, will have the money." The cabin was silent. The only sound was the wind, crying like a lost soul. Talon understood. He understood everything. This was not a lost girl. This was a war against a man with $100, in a land where a man would be killed for 10. A man like Slade, who ran a whole camp, would not send 1 or 2 men. He would send a posse. He would send trackers. He would send killers. To keep her here was not an act of kindness. It was an act of defiance. It was a declaration of war against Slade and his whole world, the world of money and guns and white men's law. Clara waited. She expected him to tell her to leave, to take her out at first light and point her toward the mountains. He was one man. He lived in secret. He could not fight a private army. He sat for a long time. The embers in the stove were fading, the red light growing dim. Finally, he stood up. He did not look at her. He walked to the cabin door. He lifted the bar and opened it a crack. The cold night air flooded in. The moon was high. It was a sliver of bone, and it cast a pale, ghostly light over the red sand and the black, sharp shadows of the canyon walls. He stood in the doorway, a tall silhouette against the pale land. He was looking out at the world he had hidden from, and now it had found him. It had sent this broken, bleeding piece of itself to his door. He felt the old weight, the shame, the faces of the dead. He had run. He had hidden. He had failed his people. He had failed himself. Now, this girl, this Atsiki, she was one. She was not a nation. She was not a clan. She was one small, weak, hunted thing. Perhaps one was all he could save. He spoke, his voice so low she almost did not hear it. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to the moon, to the red rocks, to the ghosts of his ancestors. Once again, he whispered, "I am on the weak side." He closed his eyes. He took a long, slow breath of the cold, clean desert air. "But this time, I will not retreat." He closed the door and dropped the heavy wooden bar back into place. The sound was final. It was a lock. It was a choice. The dawn came. Clara woke with a start, her hand flying to her throat, a scream trapped in her chest. She was not in the gully. She was not running. She was in a small, warm cabin. The smell of coffee and wood smoke filled the air. Through the open door, she could see a slice of the hidden valley. The sheer red cliffs painted a soft, clean pink by the new light. Talon was not there. She sat up, his shirt falling around her. The cot was warm. Her own dress, the one she had washed at the river, was hanging from a peg by the stove. It was dry. He must have brought it in from the cave. She found her own worn shoes. She felt awkward, an intruder in his sparse, male world. But the fear of the night was gone, replaced by a deep, aching weariness. And something else, gratitude. She had to be useful. She could not be a burden. He had made his choice. She had heard him. He would not retreat. That meant she could not either. She added a piece of juniper to the stove, just as she had seen her father do. She found his small stores. Coffee, a bag of cornmeal, salt. She found the iron pot he had used for the soup. She scrubbed it clean with sand and water from the bucket by the door. When Talon returned, walking silently from the canyon mouth, he found her sweeping the packed earth floor with a crude broom of bound twigs. She stopped, blushing, feeling caught. He did not say good morning. He simply nodded, accepting her presence. He carried his rifle and 2 more rabbits. He set them down and began to skin them with the same fluid, economic motion. He did everything. "The spring is up the canyon," he said, not looking at her. "The water there is better for drinking. This bucket is for washing." It was an instruction. It was a beginning. The days settled into a rhythm. It was a strange, silent domesticity, a life pared down to its absolute essentials. Survival. Clara learned his world. In the morning, she tended the fire while he went to the ridge to watch. He never said what he was watching for. He did not need to. She knew he was watching for Wyatt Slade's men. She learned to grind the dry corn between 2 stones to make meal for a simple, gritty bread. She learned to mend his buckskins, her small, neat stitches, a stark contrast to his rough rawhide patches. She went to the spring. It was hidden, a green, mossy cleft in the rock. She washed his few shirts, scrubbing them on the stones. She found wild berries. The ones he had pointed out were not poison. He taught her, in his quiet way. He did not speak often. He would take a plant, crush a leaf, and hold it to her nose. "Sage, good for the meat, good for cleaning a wound." Or he would point to a track in the dust. "Deer, 3 hours old, moving fast." The silence between them grew, but it was no longer an empty, awkward silence. It was a shared space. It was the quiet understanding of 2 people living on the edge. A tenderness bloomed in that quiet, as unexpectedly as a cactus flower in the high desert. It was not in words. It was in gestures. It was in the way he would leave a tin mug of hot, black coffee on the table for her when she woke. It was in the way she saved the best piece of rabbit for him, placing it in his bowl without comment. One afternoon, she was struggling to lift a heavy log for the fire. She was stubborn, refusing to ask for help. The wood slipped, scraping her arm. She hissed, dropping it. He appeared at her side. He did not speak. He simply took the log from her, split it in 2 with a single, powerful blow of his axe, and laid the pieces by the stove. His hand brushed her arm as he passed. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a shock through her that was as potent as the storm. He began to train her. The decision was as abrupt as all his others. He finished his morning coffee one day, set the mug down, and took his Winchester rifle from the wall. Clara flinched. The sight of a gun, to her, meant only violence. Men like Slade. Talon saw her flinch. His expression did not change. "You must learn," he said. He did not hand her the rifle. He held it. "This is not a toy. It is not a man's world or a woman's world. It is a world of teeth. You must have teeth of your own." He led her to the far end of the box canyon. The high stone walls would muffle the sound. confusing any echo. He gave her the rifle. It was heavy. It was heavier than she could have imagined. It was cold, oiled steel and worn wood. It smelled of power. "It will kick," he said. "Do not fight it. Let it be part of your shoulder. Become part of it." He showed her how to load a cartridge, how to work the lever, how to sight down the barrel. He was a harsh, impersonal teacher. "Breathe," he said, his voice quiet but intense, right beside her ear. "Do not hold your breath. Let it out. Squeeze the trigger. Do not pull it. Squeeze it, like you are squeezing a hand." She aimed at a white rock he had indicated, 50 yards away. She was trembling. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening. The rifle stock slammed into her shoulder, a brutal, punishing blow that knocked her back a step. The shot went wide, kicking up dust 10 feet to the left. "You closed your eyes," he said. He did not raise his voice. "Do you close your eyes when you pray? Do you think God will guide the bullet?" She flushed, angry and ashamed. Again. He made her load it. He made her aim. "Your eyes stay open," he commanded. "You look at what you are killing. You respect it. You look at it. And you decide. You, not the rifle. You." She breathed. She sighted. She squeezed. The explosion came. The kick was still brutal, but she saw the puff of dust. Much closer. Again. They practiced for an hour. Her shoulder was a mass of purple bruising. Her ears rang. But the last shot chipped the white rock. She looked at him, panting, a small, fierce pride in her eyes. He gave a single, slow nod. "Good. Now, the horse." He taught her to ride the mare, not as a passenger, but as a rider. "She is not a tool," he said, his hand on the mare's neck. "She is a partner. She feels your fear. If you are afraid, she will be afraid. If you are strong, she will be strong. Do not be her burden. Be her guide." Clara, the preacher's daughter who had been taught to be meek, to be quiet, to be a burden, found something new in herself. The cold power of the rifle, the living, breathing freedom of the horse. She was not the same girl who had run from Red Creek. The evenings were the hardest. The silence was deeper. The fire cast long, dancing shadows on the cabin walls. One night, she was mending her torn dress. He was sharpening his knife. The sound a rhythmic, metallic shing, shing, shing against the whetstone. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. He did not stop. "Why what? Why did you leave them the army? Why do you live here alone?" He stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, cold. She thought he would not answer. She had overstepped. He laid the knife down. He stared into the fire. "I wore the blue," he said, his voice flat, dead. "I was a scout. I was young. I believed their words. They spoke of peace. They spoke of a reservation, a place for my people to live, safe from the settlers." He picked up a stick and pushed at the logs in the fire. Sparks flew up. "I was a good scout," he said. "Too good. I knew the canyons. I knew the hidden springs. I knew where the women and children hid when the warriors rode out. I gave them maps." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They sent me away, a false message, to the north. When I returned, there was only ash. The soldiers, they had used my maps." He looked at her, and his eyes were not the calm, steady eyes she knew. They were hollow. They were filled with ghosts. "They did not subdue the hostiles," he said, the words biting, words he was quoting. "They slaughtered them. They burned the orchards. They shot the sheep. They shot everyone." He looked down at his own hands. "I had shared coffee with those men. I had led them, my knowledge, my people. I am dying. I am supposed to be a protector. I was their executioner." He stood up. He could not be still. "I walked away. I came here to be nothing, to be no one. I came here to wait for the spirits to take me. I have a great shame. Clara looked at him, her heart aching. His guilt was a canyon, as deep and as vast as the ones outside. "You were betrayed," she whispered. "I was a fool," he said, his voice like stone. She stood up. She did not know what she was doing. She only knew she had to. She walked to him. She put her hand on his arm. He flinched, but he did not pull away. He was rigid, a man carved from rock. "I know. Shame," she said. Her own voice was trembling. "It is not the same, but I know it." He looked down at her. "That man, Wyatt Slade, he looked at me. He looked at me like I was a thing, a horse to be bought, a chair for his house. He put his hands on me, and he owned me." Tears streamed down her face. "I was a preacher's daughter. I was supposed to be good, pure, and I felt dirty. I felt like property, like I was not a person, just a thing for a man to use." She was crying for him. She was crying for herself. You see a savage. When you look in the mirror, he saw a possession. When he looked at me, we were both less than human to them. Talon looked at her, at this small, brave woman in his oversized shirt. He saw her pain. It was the same as his, a different shape, a different language, but it was the same wound, the wound of being dehumanized. His hand slowly covered hers, where it rested on his arm. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was light. "I do not see a savage," he said, his voice low. He was not talking about himself. He was talking about her. The moment stretched. The fire crackled. The empathy in the small room was a physical thing, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. It was the first true human contact either of them had known in a very long time. Far away, in the noise and filth of Red Creek, a different kind of meeting was taking place. The saloon was full. Wyatt Slade was in a black mood. He slammed his whiskey glass on the bar. $100, he boomed, his face red. "And not one of you drunkards has found her. She is one woman, on foot." The men looked at their boots. A man in the corner said nothing. He was lean, dressed in a gray, dusty coat. He nursed a single beer. His face was weathered, his eyes a pale, cold blue. Slade's deputy pointed him out. "That's Maddox, Cole Maddox. He's a tracker." Slade stomped over. "Maddox, they say you can track a shadow over bare rock." Maddox did not look up. "Sometimes depends on the shadow." "I want a girl, a runaway. Clara Whitfield." Slade threw the poster onto the table. $100. Maddox looked at the poster. He looked at the sum. "She ain't worth that." "She is to me," Slade growled. "She stole from me." "What did she steal?" Maddox asked, his voice soft. "My property," Slade said, "and my respect. I want her back, and I want the man she's with." "Man," Maddox's eyes finally lifted. "Poster says she was alone." "She's with someone now," a drunk miner offered. "An Indian. Lives up in the high canyons. They call him the Ghost." Maddox's body went still. His hand tightened on his glass. "The Ghost. Does this ghost have a name?" "Talon," the miner said. "Talon Redhawk." A muscle jumped in Maddox's jaw. He knew that name. He had scouted with Talon Redhawk. They had been in the blue together. Talon was the only man Maddox had ever known who was a better tracker than he was. He had respected him, until Talon had turned his back and walked away, a deserter. "He's good," Maddox said, his voice barely a whisper. "I do not care if he is good," Slade said. "I want him dead. I want her back. She needs to be taught a lesson." Maddox looked at Slade's wet eyes, his thick, brutal hands. He looked back at the poster. "Living or dead?" "That's the one." Maddox pushed the poster back. "My price is $200. Half now. Slade's eyes narrowed, but he smiled. This was a language he understood. Done. Cole Maddox drained his beer. He stood up. He knew where Talon would be. There was only one place in this territory strong enough to hold him. A small, hidden box canyon near the river, a place they had found together years ago. The danger was no longer a vague threat. It had a name, it had a face, and it was coming. Talon felt it. He was on the ridge, his usual morning watch. The valley was empty. Too empty. No deer, no hawks. The land was holding its breath. He came back to the cabin. Clara was packing. She had seen his face. "They are coming," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." He unrolled a worn piece of hide. On it, drawn in charcoal, was a map. "We cannot stay. This place is a fortress, but it is also a trap. Once they are at the mouth, we are finished." "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice steady. She was not the girl from the river. She was the woman who had learned the rifle. He pointed. "Here, south, across the desert, the border, Mexico. It is a long way, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3. The land is hard. It will not be easy." "Slade's money is no good there," she said. "His money is no good there," Talon confirmed. He began to gather his own things. Ammunition, water skins, dried meat, salt. He was not a man hiding anymore. He was a warrior again. "They will send a tracker," he said. "They will send the best they have. Can we beat him?" Talon looked at her. He saw her strength. He saw her fear. He saw her trust. "We will not beat him," he said. "We will outlast him." He slung his rifle over his shoulder. He helped her onto the mare. He mounted behind her, his body a shield. The hidden life was over. The hunt had begun. He nudged the mare forward, out of the small, hidden canyon, and into the vast, dangerous, open desert. They did not stop. They pushed south, leaving the sanctuary of the hidden valley behind them. The world opened up, vast and intimidating. The red rock walls fell away, replaced by a high, arid plateau that stretched to a shimmering horizon. The sun was a hammer. There was no shade. There was only the sparse, gray sagebrush and the endless, pale blue sky. Talon led the mare on foot, his moccasins leaving almost no trace on the hard, baked earth. Clara rode, the rifle held across her lap. She was no longer a passenger. She was a sentry. Her eyes scanned the ridges, the empty spaces, the same way his did. He had taught her what to look for: the glint of sun on a rifle barrel, the unnatural movement of a man, a plume of dust that did not belong to the wind. They moved in silence. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on them. They camped the first night in a dry wash, a scar in the earth, with no fire. They ate cold, dried meat, and drank sparingly from one of the water skins. They slept back to back, for warmth and for security, starting at every sound: the scurry of a lizard, the distant cry of a coyote. The next day was harder. The land began to break, falling into a maze of smaller canyons and rocky draws. It was treacherous country. Talon was pushing the mare hard, but he was also being careful, using the broken land to hide their trail. By late afternoon, they were low on water. The skin he had filled at their spring was nearly empty. The map in his mind, the one he had carried for years, showed a small, hidden seep, a place only the animals and the Dine knew. It was a risk. It was off their path, down in a tight, boulder-strewn arroyo. But they needed the water. He found it. It was little more than a wet patch of rock, screened by thorny mesquite, a dark, shallow pool, no bigger than his hand. Collected the water, one slow drop at a time. "Fill the skins," he said to Clara, his voice a low rasp. "I will watch the rim." He handed her his rifle. "Keep this, do not hesitate." He climbed the rocks above her, disappearing like smoke, his own knife in his hand. Clara knelt by the pool. The silence of the arroyo was absolute. It was terrifying. She untied the first water skin. The slow, gurgling sound of it filling was an intrusion. She was alone. She was exposed. She finished the first skin and started on the second. A rock clattered, high up on the opposite rim. Clara froze. Her head snapped up. She saw nothing. It was probably just an animal. A goat. Then a voice, rough and thick, cut through the silence. Well, look what we got here, boys. A little lost lamb. 3 men stepped out from the rocks, not 50 yards away. They were white men, their clothes in rags. They were not Slade's men. They were desert rats, scavengers, their faces burned black by the sun, their eyes holding a particular desperate, starved madness. They all held rifles. Clara's heart seized. She did not scream. She did not move. Just the one, the leader, a big man with a matted yellow beard, said, he grinned, showing broken, black teeth, and a horse, and water. And she's got a rifle, another, a skinny one, pointed out. She ain't gonna use it, the leader said, taking a step down. Are you, darling? You just be sweet now. Hand that over. We'll take good care of you. Clara's mind was white with panic. She could not breathe. She thought of Slade. She thought of this. It was the same. It was the end. I said, hand it over, the man barked. Clara's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the Winchester. Then she heard Talon's voice. He was still invisible. His voice seemed to come from the rocks themselves, from everywhere at once. It was cold. It was calm. It was the voice of death. She will not hand it over, but you will drop yours. The 3 men spun around, rifles coming up, their eyes wide, searching the rocks. Who's there? Show yourself. Drop the rifles. Talon's voice came again, from a different spot. Or the first man dies. The leader snarled. There's one of him. 3 of us. He's bluffing. Get the girl. The skinny one and the third man started to scramble down the rocks toward her. The leader stayed on the rim, his rifle aimed at where he thought Talon's voice had come from. Talon! Clara screamed, her voice breaking. Now, Clara! Talon's voice was a roar. The skinny man was halfway down. He was grinning. He was 10 yards from her. Clara forgot the weight of the rifle. She forgot the kick. She forgot the sound. She only saw the man's grinning face. She saw Wyatt Slade. She saw all of them. She brought the rifle up. She did not close her eyes. She breathed out. She squeezed the trigger. The explosion filled the small arroyo, the sound bouncing off the rock walls, a solid crack of thunder. The man's grin vanished. A red flower bloomed on his chest. He looked down at it, a look of profound surprise on his face. He made a small, wet sound, and pitched forward, tumbling down the rocks to land in a heap at her feet. The third man stopped, frozen. The leader cursed, spinning his rifle toward Clara. Before he could fire, a sound like a hard, fast whip crack came from the rocks above. The leader's head snapped back. His rifle discharged into the empty sky. He collapsed and did not move. The third man, the last one, dropped his rifle. It clattered on the stones. He threw his hands high in the air. Do not shoot, I give up, do not shoot. Clara was still standing, the rifle smoking in her hands. She was staring at the man she had just killed. His eyes were open. He was not grinning anymore. She heard a sound behind her. Talon was there. He had not been on the rim. He had been behind her all along, in a crack in the rock, just yards away. He had his knife in one hand. He had his revolver in the other. He walked past her, toward the man with his hands up. The man was shaking, tears of terror streaming down his face. Talon did not raise his gun. He did not speak. He just gestured with his head. Go, run, do not look back. The man scrambled away, half falling, half crawling up the far side of the arroyo. He disappeared over the rim. The arroyo was silent again. There was only the sound of Clara's ragged breathing and the slow, steady drip, drip, drip of the water into the pool. Talon walked to the man Clara had shot. He looked down at him. He knelt, and with a strange, detached reverence, he closed the man's open eyes. Then he looked at Clara. She was white as a sheet, her knuckles white on the rifle. She was going to be sick. I, she stammered. I killed him. Yes, Talon said. He stood up. He walked to her. He did not touch her. He just looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. You are shaking, he said. I took a life. God forgive me. He was going to take yours, Talon said, his voice flat. He was going to do more than that. You did what you had to do. You survived. That is the only law here. You had teeth. You used them. She looked at the dead man, then back at him, her eyes wide with a terrible, new understanding. He was impressed. He was more than impressed. He was stunned. He had seen soldiers, brave men, freeze in their first fight. He had seen them run. She had been terrified. She had been shaking so badly she could barely stand, but she had held the rifle. She had aimed, and she had not missed. This was not a weak, broken thing he had found by the river. This was not a victim. This was a survivor. This was a warrior, in her own way. He gently, firmly, took the rifle from her hands. Finish with the water. We must go. The shots will carry. Others will come. Not him. He nodded at the man with his hands up. But others. Clara was trembling, but she nodded. She turned back to the spring, her movements robotic. She finished filling the skins. She did not look at the dead man again. Talon reloaded the rifle. He took the dead men's ammunition and their water. He left their guns. He pulled their bodies into the shade of the mesquite. The land will reclaim them, he said. He helped her onto the mare. He mounted behind her. His arm came around her, to hold the reins. He could feel her. She was still shivering, but her back was straight. He nudged the mare forward. He had been her protector. Now, in some small, profound way, they were partners. That night, the storm came back. A cold, driving rain that began just after sunset. They found shelter, not a cave, but a deep overhang in a cliff face. It was dry, but the wind whipped the rain in, and the temperature plummeted. They were cold. They were soaked. They were exhausted. We must have a fire, Talon said. The risk of the smoke was less than the risk of freezing. He found a place deep under the rock, where the smoke would be baffled by the stone and dissipated by the rain. He used his tinder, and soon a small, clean fire was burning. They sat huddled by it, their blankets pulled tight. The two dead men lay between them, an unspoken shadow. I will see his face, Clara whispered, staring into the flames. When I close my eyes, I will always see his face. Talon nodded. He poked the fire with a stick. I see many faces. The men I killed in the blue coat, the women and children I did not save. He looked at her. The firelight softened the hard lines of his face. It does not go away. He said, the memory. You do not forget, but you make a space for it. You build your life around it. You carry it. It is the price of living. Is that all there is? She asked, her voice desolate. Just carrying it, just surviving. No, he said. He looked out at the rain, a silver, wind-swept curtain in the darkness. There is freedom, what we are doing now. We are not running from Slade. We are running to something, to a place where we can set the rifle down, a place where we can be. I do not know what that looks like, she said. I have always belonged to someone. My father, then him. I do not know how to just be. I am teaching you, he said, and you are teaching me. She looked at him, surprised. What am I teaching you? You are teaching me, he said, his voice low, "that I am not a ghost, that I am still a man, that my shame does not have to be the end of my life." They sat in silence. The rain hammered down. The fire crackled. The warmth between them was more than just the fire. It was a fragile, human thing. It was two solitudes, touching in the dark. Clara felt a profound weariness. She was so tired of being afraid. She was so tired of being alone. She leaned, just a little, her shoulder resting against his. He stiffened. For a long second, he was still as stone. Then he relaxed. He did not pull away. He did not put his arm around her. He just let her lean. He accepted the weight. It was not passion. It was not the fire that men like Slade wanted. It was something far deeper. It was two broken, exhausted people finding a small, warm, dry place in a storm. It was peace. "We will make it," she whispered. "Yes," he said, and he believed it. They slept. At the first hint of dawn, Talon was gone. He had moved without waking her. When she opened her eyes, he was standing at the edge of the rock overhang, staring down at the wet sand of the wash below. He was as still as he had been in the cabin. That night he made his choice. But this was a different stillness. It was the stillness of a predator. "Clara," he said, his voice low. She got up, pulling the blanket around her. She walked to his side. "What is it?" He pointed. In the damp sand, not 20 yards from their shelter, was a set of new footprints. They had been made in the last hour. It was not the robbers. It was not a group. It was one man. The footprints were neat. They were deep at the heel. The man was walking slowly, confidently. He had come up the wash. He had seen their fire. He had stood there, in the dark, watching them sleep. Then he had turned and walked away. "Who?" Clara whispered. "A tracker," Talon said. "A very, very good one. He is not here to kill us. Not yet. He is playing with us. He is showing me that he can—" Talon's face was grim. He knew that stride. He knew that confidence. "Cole Maddox, he was a scout with me. He is the only other man who knows these canyons." Clara's blood ran cold. He watched us." "He watched us," Talon confirmed. "He knows we are tired. He knows we are on edge. He is hurting us." Talon looked south. The way they had been going, it was open. It was a trap. Maddox would let them get out into the open desert, far from water, and then he would close in. "We cannot go south," Talon said. He turned and looked west, toward a line of jagged black peaks that tore at the sky. "What is that place?" Clara asked. "Coyote Ridge," he said. "It is a bad place. The Utes call it the Spirit Road, a maze of rock, no water, and the wind. It cuts to the bone. Men get lost there. They go mad. No one goes there. Not even Maddox would be foolish enough to follow us in deep." "Can we make it?" Talon looked at her. He saw the warrior from yesterday. He saw the woman from last night. "We can, but we must go now. He will expect us to run south. We will run west. We will do the thing he does not expect." They did not pack. They just gathered their things. The sun was not yet risen, but the sky was turning a pale, sick gray. In the west, the moon, a sliver of red, was sinking toward the black peaks. It looked like a fresh wound in the sky. "It is a bad sign," Clara whispered, looking at the blood-red moon. "It is just the moon," Talon said, but his voice was tight. "Let's ride." They left their shelter, their small place of peace, and rode out into the cold. Gray dawn, toward the one place on earth that might be worse than the men hunting them. Coyote Ridge was not a place. It was a punishment. The jagged, black volcanic rock tore at the mare's hooves. It was a land of sharp edges and steep, sudden drops. The Utes had been right to call it a spirit road. It was a place for ghosts, not for the living. The wind never stopped. It did not whisper. It screamed, a high, thin wail that clawed at their nerves, a sound of madness. They had ridden for half a day, Talon pushing the mare as hard as he dared. But the ground was too treacherous. He dismounted, his moccasins finding purchase where iron shoes slipped. He led the horse. Clara walked behind, her hand on the saddlebag, using the animal for balance. By noon, the world changed. The blue sky vanished, replaced by a sickly, swirling yellow. The wind did not stop. It shifted, becoming a physical, roaring force. "Sandstorm!" Talon yelled over the sound. "This way! Now!" He pulled the mare, half dragging her, into a deep cleft in the rock. It was little more than a crack, a space barely wide enough for the three of them. They huddled together, the horse trembling, her eyes wide with terror. Talon pulled a blanket over his head and Clara's, pressing her face against his chest. "Breathe through the wool," he commanded. The storm hit them. It was not dust, it was sand, a million tiny, sharp needles that blasted the rock. The sound was a continuous, deafening roar, as if the mountain itself was collapsing around them. They crouched in the dark, in the suffocating heat, for hours. Clara was shaking. He held her, his arm a steel band around her, anchoring her. He was an unmovable object. He was the rock the storm could not break. When it finally passed, the world was alien. The landscape was scoured. The rocks were smooth. The sun was a dull, red eye in a hazy, bronze sky, and their tracks were gone. "Good," he said, his voice hoarse. "He cannot follow us now." But the storm had taken its toll. It had sucked the moisture from their bodies. Their water skins, which had been half full, were now dangerously light. They had 2 days of hard travel, perhaps 3, to clear the ridge, and they had less than a day's worth of water. The second day was a silent, walking hell. The mare was weak. Talon walked, his feet bleeding inside his moccasins. The rock was like broken glass. Clara walked. She did not complain. She did not cry. She just put one foot in front of the other, her face a pale, grim mask. That night, they found a snake. It struck from a ledge as they passed, a thick, diamond-patterned rattler, buzzing with fury. Talon moved faster than Clara had ever seen. He was not a man. He was a bolt of lightning. He shoved her backward, hard, and the snake's fangs hit the thick leather of his boot. He killed it with a single, blurred motion of his knife, severing its head. Clara leaned against the rock, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Talon stood over the dead reptile, his own breathing heavy. This place was trying to kill them at every step. "We will eat," he said, his voice grim. He skinned the snake. They ate the meat raw. It was tough and tasted of dust, but it was food. They had 1 sip of water each. On the third morning, Clara fell. She did not trip. Her legs simply gave out. She collapsed into the red dust. Talon stopped. He turned. He looked down at her. The mare stood, head hanging, too tired to even graze. "Get up," he said. His voice was not kind. It was harsh. "I cannot," she whispered. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. "I cannot walk." "Get up, Clara. We are close." "Leave me!" She turned her face away from him. "Go. You are faster. You can make it. Please, just go." He looked at her. He saw the girl by the river. He saw the women he had failed to save. He saw the ghosts. They were all whispering. "Run. Save yourself. You know how." He remembered his choice. He remembered his words in the dark cabin. "This time, I will not retreat." He said nothing. He walked to her. He slung his rifle over his back. He crouched down, his back to her. What are you doing?" she whispered. "Get on." "No, Talon, I am too heavy. You cannot. You will kill us both." "Get on," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. She was too weak to fight him. With the last of her strength, she draped her arms around his neck. He grabbed her legs, settled her weight on his back, and stood up. She was impossibly light. He had thought she would be heavy, but she was a handful of twigs, a bundle of dry leaves. He was shamed by how light she was, by how much the world had taken from her. He grabbed the mare's reins. He began to walk. He walked for hours. He was no longer a man. He was a machine. He was pure will. One foot, then the next, the rocks tore at him. His lungs burned. The sun beat on his back. Clara was a dead weight, half conscious, her breath a warm, faint puff against his neck. He was carrying his own guilt. He was carrying his shame. He was carrying his redemption. He came to a wall of rock, a narrow pass, choked with boulders, the end of the line. He looked at it. His body screamed for him to stop, to lie down, to die. He thought of Slade. He thought of the rope burns on her wrists. He began to climb. He hauled the mare up over the first boulder. He scrambled, his hands raw, finding purchase. He felt Clara slip. He grabbed her, hiking her back up. He pulled the mare. He climbed. The world was reduced to the next handhold, the burn in his muscles, the rasp of his own breathing. He was climbing out of the grave. He was climbing for both of them. He reached the top. He stood, swaying, on the crest of the ridge. And he heard it. It was not the wind. It was a sound he thought he would never hear again. It was a small, quiet, impossible sound. It was water. He stumbled forward, following the sound. He pushed through a screen of dry, dead thorns. And he saw it. It was a miracle, a tiny spring, weeping from the black rock, gathering in a shallow, clean pool no bigger than his saddle. The water was clear. It was real. He did not drink. He slid Clara from his back, setting her down gently on the sand beside the pool. He let the mare walk forward, and the horse plunged her muzzle into the water, drinking deep. He knelt. He took the water skin. He filled it. He held it to Clara's lips. "Drink," he whispered, his voice a cracked rasp. She drank. The water ran down her chin. She coughed, choked, and drank again. He watched the life flow back into her. He watched her eyes focus. He splashed the cold water on his own face. He drank, long and deep. It was the sweetest water he had ever tasted. Clara sat up. She looked at him. She looked at his bleeding feet. She looked at his raw hands. She looked at his back, dark with her sweat and his... She did not have the words. She did not need them. She looked down at herself. She was wearing his shirt, the linen one he had given her in the cabin. It was torn. It was filthy. And on the cuff there was a dark, faded stain, the blood of the man she had killed in the arroyo. She dipped her hand in the clean water. She began to scrub at the stain. Talon watched her. The setting sun broke through the clouds, lighting the small, hidden sanctuary. The light was soft. He saw her, kneeling by the water, trying to wash away the blood. It was the same as the first day, the girl by the river. But she was not the same, and he was not the same. He walked over. He knelt beside her. She looked up, her eyes wet, but not just from the water. He said it, his voice low and full of a feeling he did not know he still possessed. "You ain't alone no more." She stopped washing. She met his gaze. The first time he had said it. It had been a statement. This time, it was a vow. A tear traced a clean path through the dust on her cheek. "I will not leave you, Talon," she whispered. Her hand, wet and cold, found his... He turned his hand, lacing his rough, bloody fingers with hers. "And I will not fail you, Clara, not ever." It was an oath. It was a promise deeper than love, sealed in blood and water, in this impossible place. It was the healing of his past. It was the beginning of her future. A sharp, violent crack shattered the peace. A bullet smashed into the rock, not an inch from Clara's head, Stone shrapnel stung her cheek. Talon did not think. He reacted. He grabbed her, shoving her behind the boulders that sheltered the spring. "Stay down. Do not move." Another shot. Crackett kicked up the sand where he had been kneeling. A voice, high and mocking, echoed down from the rocks above them. "Talon, you got slow. Old friend, you got soft. Used to be you'd have smelled me 2 hours ago." "Maddox," Talon hissed. He had his Winchester. He peered around the rock. He saw movement, and not just one man, 3. Maddox had brought Slade's men. "He followed us," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "He came in after us." "He is a fool," Talon said, his voice cold. He was no longer the man. He was the ghost. "Stay here. I gave you the revolver. Do not use it, unless he is on top of you." He looked at her. "Do you understand?" She nodded, her hand gripping the gun he had given her. He disappeared. He did not run. He melted into the rocks, moving up, circling. Clara huddled, her heart hammering. She heard the men. They were crashing through the brush, no longer trying to be quiet. "I see him," one of them yelled. "A shot!" Bang! A man screamed. It was not Talon's voice. "He's over there!" another yelled. Cracked the sharp, clean report of Talon's Winchester. Another scream, this one cut short. Silence. "Damn you! Talon!" It was Maddox's voice. He was closer now. "It's just me and you, like it should have been." Clara peeked over the rock. She saw Maddox, lean and fast, moving from boulder to boulder, his rifle ready. He was good. He was a mirror of Talon. Then she saw Talon. He was on a ledge, high above Maddox. He had the high ground. He was trapped, but Talon was trapped, too. Talon raised his rifle, sighting down. Bang! Maddox fired first. He had anticipated. He had heard a scrape of rock. Talon grunted, a deep, pained sound. He dropped his rifle. It clattered down the rocks, landing in the dust. He slumped back against the cliff, his hand clutching his shoulder. A dark, wet stain was spreading across his buckskin shirt. "Talon!" Clara screamed. "Got you!" Maddox roared. He stood up from behind his rock, a triumphant, terrible grin on his face. "It's over. Red Hawk, you're hit. You're done." He began to walk forward, his rifle aimed at Talon's chest. "Give me the girl. Talon. Slade wants her. He's paying double now. Did you know that he doubled the reward? $200 for her, $200 for your head. You picked a bad time to get soft." Talon was sliding down the rock. He was bleeding, badly. He looked at Clara. His face was pale, contorted in pain, but his eyes were clear. He gave her a small, sharp nod. "Teeth. Clara, use your teeth." Maddox was focused on Talon. He was 20 yards away. He was savoring his victory. "You were always weak, Talon. Walked away from the army. Now you die for a—" He never finished the word. Bang! The sound was different, louder, a heavy, booming sound. It was the revolver. Maddox stopped. He looked confused, just like the man in the arroyo. He looked down at his chest, a dark, spreading stain. He looked over, slowly, at the spring. Clara was standing. Her arm was outstretched. The heavy revolver was smoking in her hand. Her face was as pale as death, but her hand was not shaking. Maddox looked at Talon. He gave a strange, wet chuckle. "Well, you did teach her." He crumpled to the ground. He was dead. The silence that fell was absolute. Clara ran to Talon. "You are hit! You are bleeding!" "It is just blood," he gasped, but his face was gray. The bullet had gone into his shoulder. High up, it was bad. She ripped a long strip from the shirt she was wearing. She packed it against the wound, hard. "Maddox is dead," she said, her voice shaking now. "They are all dead. We are safe." We can go. We can keep going to Mexico." She was ready to run, to grab the water and run. Talon looked at her. He was weak, leaning on her for support. Clara stopped. She looked at her hands, covered in his blood. She looked at the dead men. She thought of Maddox's words. Double the reward. They could run. They could make it to Mexico. But Slade would not stop. He would send more men, and more. They would never be free. He would hunt them forever, because she had defied him. He would hunt Talon, because he had protected her. The girl from the river was gone. The woman from the arroyo was gone. "No," she said. Her voice was cold. It was steel. Talon looked at her, his breathing shallow. "We are not going to Mexico," she said. She was not asking. She was telling him, he will send more. They will never stop. She met his gaze. Her eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a woman who had seen the worst and had survived. "He wants me," she said. "He wants to teach me a lesson. He wants to own me." She finished tying the bandage. She pulled it tight, and he winced. "I am going back," she said. "I am going to Red Creek." "Clara, you cannot—" "I am going to face him. This time, I am not running." He looked at her. He saw the fire her preacher father must have had. He saw the steel of the woman who had killed 3 men. He saw the woman who had saved his life. He was wounded. She was strong. The scales had balanced. He nodded, a slow, painful movement. "Then we will go, together." The journey back was a waking nightmare. They had no choice but to take the mare. Talon could not walk. The bullet from Maddox's rifle was lodged deep in his shoulder, and the wound had festered on the ridge. He was weak, burning with fever, his body slick with a cold sweat. Clara, fueled by a purpose so cold and hard it felt like iron in her veins, became the leader. She used the last of the yarrow, the paste he had made in the cabin, to pack the wound. But she knew it was not enough. This was not a rope burn. This was a deep, killing wound. She managed to get him onto the mare. He was a dead weight, barely conscious. She walked beside the horse, her hand on his leg to keep him from falling, the revolver tucked into the waistband of his leggings, which she still wore. She held his rifle in her other hand. She led them off the Spirit Road, down from the black volcanic rock of Coyote Ridge, and back onto the familiar, hated red earth of the valley. She walked all day and into the night. Talon did not speak. He only gasped, a dry, shallow sound. She did not let herself think about what she was doing. She did not let herself feel the terror. She was a weapon. She was a blade, pointed at the heart of Red Creek. They arrived late. The moon was a high, disinterested sliver. Red Creek was not a town. It was a scar, a collection of ramshackle buildings and tents clawed from the side of a mountain. But it was not quiet. The largest building, the only one with 2 stories, was Wyatt Slade's saloon. It was called the Silver Dollar. Light spilled from its filthy windows, a diseased yellow glow. The sound of a badly tuned piano and the roar of drunken male laughter crashed into the night. Clara led the mare into the shadows, into a collapsing lean-to stable on the edge of the camp. Talon slid from the horse, collapsing into the straw. "Talon," she whispered, shaking him. He was barely responsive. His skin was on fire. "Clara," he breathed, his eyes fighting to focus. "Do not. This is death. He will kill you." "He will not," she said. Her voice was flat. She took one of the water skins and put it to his lips. He drank, weakly. "You stay here," she commanded. "Do not move. Do not make a sound. I will end this. Then I will come back for you." "No," he gasped, his hand fumbling, trying to find her. "This is my fight." "You fought," she said, her voice softening for just a second. She touched his face. "You fought on the ridge. You carried me. Now it is my turn. You said it yourself. We are partners." She left him? She took the revolver. She checked it. 5 shots left. She walked out of the shadows and into the main, muddy street. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer, unwashed bodies, sulfur from the mines, and the faint, lingering scent of gunpowder. This place always smelled of gunpowder. She walked toward the silver dollar. The miners she passed, men with dead eyes and blackened faces, stopped and stared. They saw a ghost. They saw the girl who had run. She was back, and she was not the same. She was wearing a man's torn shirt, covered in blood. Her face was streaked with dirt. Her eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a woman who had come to collect a debt. She pushed open the swinging doors of the saloon. The sound hit her like a physical blow. The heat, the smell of cheap whiskey. The room went silent. The piano player's hands froze above the keys. The saloon was packed, shoulder to shoulder with miners. And at the back, at a large table, sat Wyatt Slade. He was holding a glass of whiskey, a cigar in his other hand. He was surrounded by his paid men, his gun thugs, and next to him, laughing at something he had said, was the town sheriff, his tin star pinned crookedly to his vest. He was drinking Slade's whiskey. Clara saw it all in one cold glance. There was no law. There was no justice. There was only Slade. Wyatt looked up. His smile froze on his face. He stared at her, his small, wet eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, the disbelief turned to amusement. He put his whiskey down. He stood up. He was a large man, his belly straining his waistcoat. "Well," he boomed, his voice filling the dead, silent room. "Bait, the trap returns. I heard Maddox had caught you. I was just toasting to him. I suppose he is outside, counting his money." Clara said nothing. She just looked at him. Slade's smile faltered. He did not like her silence. He did not like the way she looked at him. "Where is he? Girl, where is Maddox? And where is that Indian dog he was supposed to kill?" "They are dead," Clara said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "They are on Coyote Ridge. They are all dead." The sheriff, who had been grinning, stopped. He took a nervous step away from Slade. Slade's face turned a deep, blotchy red. "You lie. Maddox was the best." "He was not good enough," Clara said. Slade stared at her. He saw the revolver in her waistband. He saw the blood on her shirt. He saw the truth, and it enraged him. This thing, this property, she had beaten him. "So," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You came back. Did you miss me so much? Clara, did you find the desert was too cold? Did the savage get boring?" He took a step toward her. The miners moved, parting for him. "You came back to your owner," he sneered. "A little late. But you know the rules. You need to be taught a lesson. You need to be broken. Properly, this time." He was 5 feet from her. He reached out, his thick, heavy hand open, to grab her arm, to seize her. "You are mine, girl. You were always—" "Let her go." The voice was not Clara's. It was weak. It was a rasp. But it was a command. Every head turned. Talon was standing in the doorway. He was a vision from hell. He was leaning against the doorframe, his left arm hanging useless, his shirt and leggings soaked in his own blood. He was pale, shaking, and looked more ghost than man. But his right hand was steady, and it held his revolver. Slade stopped. He laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. You are half dead. You can barely stand. You came here to die." "I came here," Talon breathed. His eyes locked on Slade. "To finish this." "You are a fool," Slade said. He was furious. His control was broken. His whole world, his power, was being challenged by a wounded Indian and a half-starved girl in front of his whole town. "You want to fight?" Slade roared. "Fine, but not in my saloon. I will not have my tables shot up." He pointed a thick finger at Talon. "The stables. You and me. We find out who the real man is." Talon looked at Clara. She was pale, but she nodded. This was the only way. "The stables," Talon agreed. Slade grinned. He was a big man. He was healthy. Talon was dying on his feet. This was not a fair fight. This was an execution. "Clear the way," Slade bellowed. The miners scrambled out of the saloon, a wave of bodies rushing into the muddy street. They followed Slade, who stomped toward the large livery stable where he kept his horses. Clara ran to Talon. She put her shoulder under his good arm. "Talon, you cannot. You will not make it." "He is right," Talon whispered, leaning on her. "This is the only way. This ends now, or we run forever." She helped him walk. Every step was an agony. They followed the crowd. The stable was huge, dark, and smelled of hay, manure, and old leather. A few lanterns hung from the beams, casting long, deep shadows. The miners and the saloon women crowded at the entrance, their faces pale and eager in the gloom. Slade was at the far end of the long central aisle. He had his coat off. He was checking his revolver. Talon stood at the entrance, Clara holding him up. "Let me go," he whispered. She let him go. He stood on his own. He was swaying. He looked as if a stiff breeze would knock him over, but his eyes were fire. "Just you and me, savage," Slade sneered. He stood, his feet apart, his hand near his gun. "The girl watches. She sees what happens to men who touch my property." Talon did not speak. He just breathed. He was gathering what was left of himself. He was gathering the spirits of his ancestors. He was gathering the memory of the canyon, the shame, and the promise he had made. "I am tired of your talk." Slade said, "Draw." Slade's hand moved. He was fast. For a big man, his gun was clear of the holster. But Talon was not a man. He was a warrior. His hand was not fast. It was just there. 2 shots exploded. So close together they sounded like one bang, bang. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The horses in the stalls screamed. The crowd gasped. For a long, long second, nothing happened. Both men were standing. Slade looked down. A small, dark hole had appeared in the center of his white shirt. He looked up at Talon, his face a mask of total, absolute surprise. "Damn you," he whispered. He crumpled, falling forward into the hay. He was dead. Talon stood, his arms still outstretched. The crowd was silent, staring at Slade's body. Clara ran to him. "Talon!" He turned. He looked at her. He gave her a small, faint smile. And she saw it, a new, dark stain spreading across his stomach. Slade's bullet had hit him, low, bad. "Oh, God!" she whispered. He fell. He did not fall like Slade. He collapsed, his legs giving way. She caught him before he hit the ground. The crowd stared. Their tyrant was dead. Their world had just been broken open. Clara did not care. She was on her knees, in the dirt, holding him. "You are hurt. You are hurt again." "This one is worse," he gasped, his face ashen. It began to rain. A cold, fine drizzle began to drift through the open stable doors, mixing with the dust. She had to get him out. She could not save him here. She looked up at the crowd. Their faces were blank, stunned. They would not help her, but they would not stop her. "Help me," she begged him. "Talon, you must help me. I cannot lift you." He put his good arm around her neck. He tried to stand. He could not. She began to drag him. She pulled him, scraping him through the dirt and hay, out of the stable, into the muddy street. The rain was falling harder now. She was dragging him, step by agonizing step, toward the mare. A woman came running from the shadows. It was the woman who had taken Clara's job at the cook tent. She said nothing. She shoved a burlap sack into Clara's free hand. It was heavy, bread, a bottle of whiskey, and clean rags. Clara looked at her, her eyes wide with gratitude. The woman just nodded, her face grim, and disappeared. A man, the stable hand who had been kicked by Slade a week ago, ran to the mare. He untied her. He led her to Clara. Together, without a word, they hauled Talon's limp body across the saddle. The awakening, it was not a cheer. It was not a revolution. It was a bottle of whiskey. It was a helping hand in the dark. It was enough. Clara took the reins. She put her hand on Talon's, which hung limply by the saddle. She led the mare out of Red Creek. She did not look back. The rain was washing the blood from the street. It was washing the blood from Talon's shirt, mixing it with the mud. She walked until the sounds of the camp were gone. She walked until the only sound was the rain, the plowing of the mare's hooves, and Talon's shallow, ragged breathing. The long, dark night of Red Creek was over. The dawn came up, a pale, watery gray. It lit a world that was washed clean, blood and rain and mud, and the first faint light of morning, all swirled together. She was alone in the desert, with a dying man. The fight for freedom was over. The fight for life had just begun. She did not know how far she walked. She only knew she could not stop. The gray, wet dawn turned into a gray, wet morning. The rain was relentless, a cold, steady curtain that blurred the world. Talon was a dead weight on the mare, his body lurching with every step of the horse. He was unconscious, or perhaps worse. She had to stop. He would die on the horse. He would bleed out, or the cold rain would finish what Slade's bullet had started. She found it, a deep overhang of red rock, a shallow cave similar to the one where they had first hidden from the storm. But this one was deeper, drier. It was a shelter. Getting him off the mare was an agony. He was not a man. He was a 6-foot length of unresponsive bone and muscle. He fell from the saddle, and she barely caught him, guiding his fall onto the bedrolls she had thrown on the sandy floor. He did not groan. He did not move. "Talon," she whispered, her hands shaking so badly she could barely function. "Talon, you must stay. Stay with me." He was burning. The fever from the shoulder wound had already been high. Now, with the new, terrible wound in his gut, his skin was dry and impossibly hot. He was dying. She knew it. She had seen this fever take her father. She took the supplies the woman had given her. The bread, the rags, the whiskey. She pulled his shirt open. The sight made her gasp. The shoulder wound was black and swollen. The bullet hole in his stomach was small, neat, but the skin around it was a deep, angry purple. It was a mortal wound. She knew, even in her ignorance, that the bullet was inside him, poisoning him. She did not have a doctor. She did not have medicine. She had whiskey and rage. She took the bottle. "Forgive me," she whispered. She poured the raw, stinging liquid over both wounds. His body arched off the ground. A sound was torn from his throat, a sound that was not human. It was the sound of an animal in a trap. His eyes flew open. They were white, unseeing. He did not know her. She used the clean rags to bandage him, packing the wounds. Her hands slick with whiskey and his blood. She covered him with every blanket they had, the horse blanket, his furs, her own. He began to shiver, a deep, bone-racking violence that shook his entire body. The rain turned from a steady drizzle into a deluge. It was a roar, a solid wall of water hitting the desert, turning the washes into churning, muddy rivers. It was as if the sky was trying to wash the blood from the land. Clara sat beside him. She had done all she could. He was in the hands of God. She began to pray. She knelt in the red dust, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Her voice was a dry, trembling whisper. "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." She looked at the man convulsing on the ground. This was not heaven. This was earth. This was hell. "Give us this day our daily bread," she choked, "and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." But she could not forgive. She could not forgive Slade. She could not forgive Maddox. She could not forgive the world that had done this. Talon began to speak. His voice was a rasp. His lips cracked and dry. He was not speaking English. He was speaking the language she had heard in the cabin. The Dine. It was a chant. He was delirious. He was calling for his own gods. Her prayer died on her lips. Her father's God felt very far away. He was a God of neat, white churches and pipe organs, not of blood and red sand and fevers. Talon's gods were here. They were in the wind, in the red rock, in the rain. She did not know the words, but she knew the sound. She had heard his chant. She put her hand on his burning forehead. "It is all right," she whispered. She tried to find a melody. She began to mix her words with his. "Holy people, hear me, Dianayoy. Forgive him. He is a good man. He is a protector. Hallowed be thy name. Please, do not take him. Ya'ati, please." She was weeping, her prayers a broken, desperate blend of two worlds. A preacher's daughter begging a Navajo god to save a man who had shown her what faith truly meant. His fevered words shifted. He was no longer chanting. He was talking. His eyes were open, but he was seeing something else. He was seeing the past. "The children!" he gasped, his hand grabbing her arm. His grip was impossibly strong. "So many. The peach trees. All ash. It is all ash." "No, Talon," she wept. "It is not ash. It is rain. It is just the rain." He looked at her, but he did not see her. He saw a ghost. I told them the Bilagana, the white men, would not hurt them. I told them it was a bridge." "It is not your fault," she whispered. "You were betrayed." I had a dream." He breathed, the fever consuming him, the words spilling out, his final confession. "I saw a valley, the river. It was clean. And the children, Dine and white children. They were playing together by the river. No guns, no blue coats, just home. The earth is big enough. It is big enough for all of us." His vision, the one he had held as a young scout, the one that had been burned to ash at Canyon de Chelly, was coming back to him at the end. Clara looked at him, her heart breaking. He was not just a warrior. He was a prophet, a broken prophet of a peace that would never come. She knew he was leaving. This was his last breath, his last dream. She had to tell him. He could not go without knowing. She bent close, her lips to his ear, her tears falling onto his face, mixing with his sweat. "Talon," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Listen to me. You must listen. I love you." His body, which had been shaking, went still. "Do you hear me?" she cried, her voice cracking. "I love you, and not because you saved me. My father saved me. Wyatt Slade offered to save me. That is just changing masters. That is just being property." She held his face between her hands. You did not just save me. You saw me. You looked at me, and you saw a person. You made me feel worthy. You put a gun in my hand. You told me to have teeth. You did not. You did not try to own me. You tried to make me free. You made me, me. And I love you for it." His eyes, they focused. The haze of the fever cleared. Just for a moment. He was not seeing ghosts. He was seeing her. He was seeing Clara. He tried to speak, a dry, rasping sound. His hand, which had been clutching the blanket, moved. It was a slow, agonizing movement. He was trying to reach for her. She took his hand. It was hot and dry as bone. He squeezed. It was a faint, faint pressure. "Live," he whispered. It was one word, a puff of air. "Live. Clara, do not run. Live." It was a last testament. It was a command. And something in her broke. The fear, the despair. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage. A rage at death. A rage at the bullet. A rage at the fever. "No," she said, her voice no longer a whisper. It was a growl. "You do not get to die. Do you hear me? Talon Redhawk, you do not get to tell me to live, and then leave me. You do not get to die. I forbid it." His dying wish had become her command to him. The storm outside reached its peak. The wind howled. The rain was a solid thing, a river falling from the sky. It was cold, so cold, and it gave her an idea. She took one of the blankets. She ran out into the deluge. She held it up until it was soaked, heavy with the icy water. She ran back in. He was shivering, but he was still burning. The heat was a dry, killing fire. She laid the freezing, soaked blanket over his burning body. He cried out, a thin, terrible sound. His body seized. "I am sorry," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "I am sorry, but you will not die." She did it again and again. She ran into the storm, soaking the cloths, the rags, her own shirt, and laid them on him. She was fighting the fever. She was fighting death with cold, clean water. She washed the blood from his skin. She washed the grime from his face. The water running off him was dark, tinted with the blood of their journey. The rain, a symbol of cleansing, had become her only weapon. The fight lasted all night. He would go from shivering so violently she thought he would break, to a heat so profound she thought he would ignite. She held him. She bathed him. She prayed, no longer in English, no longer in Navajo, but in a silent, furious language of will. Sometime, in the deepest, blackest hour before the dawn, he went still. The shivering stopped. The heat faded. He grew cool. "Talon," she whispered. He did not answer. "Talon," she cried, shaking him. He did not move. She put her head to his chest. Silence. No, no, not silence. Faint, so faint she almost missed it. A slow, shallow thump, thump. He was alive. She collapsed beside him on the sandy floor, her body spent, her will broken, her hope gone. She fell into a sleep that was more like death. Talon woke. The first thing he knew was light, a soft, golden light, filtering through a rough, woven surface. It was warm. He was not on the ridge. He was not in the stable. He was lying on his furs. The pain was, it was a thing, a separate creature. It was in his shoulder. It was a deep, terrible, burning throb in his gut. But it was not the all-consuming fire of the fever. The fever was gone. He was weak. He could not move his head. He heard a sound, a small rustle. He turned his eyes. Clara. She was sitting at the opening of the shelter. She had taken his canvas tarp and her own blankets and had laced them together, creating a small, enclosed tent against the rock wall. The storm was over. The world outside was clean, bright, and silent. She was reading. She was holding a small, black book, its covers worn, the pages thin. It was a Bible, her father's Bible. The light from the new morning shone through the canvas, making a halo of her hair. She was clean. She had washed her face. She was wearing his shirt. She looked peaceful. He, the Navajo, the ghost, the man who had abandoned all faith, had been brought back from the shadowland by this preacher's daughter, by her prayers, her whiskey, and her sheer, terrifying will. She was the reconciliation. She was the past and the present. She was the thing he had dreamed of. He made a sound, a dry cough. Her head snapped up. The Bible fell from her hands. "Talon," she whispered. She scrambled to him, her eyes wide, her hand hovering. afraid to touch him, afraid he was a ghost. He was so weak, but he had to tell her. He had to finish what he had started. His hand, which had been cold, moved. It found hers. His fingers were weak, but they closed around hers. She burst into tears, not of sorrow, of relief. He smiled. It was a faint, cracked smile. His lips were dry. "You," he whispered, his voice a bare thread of sound. "You are the spring, in this desert." The light filled the small, canvas tent. It was the first day. He lived. It was not a recovery. It was a war, fought inch by inch in the red dust of the shelter. The bullet in his gut was a poison. The fever was a constant, simmering enemy. For 10 days, Clara did not leave his side. She was no longer a woman. She was a nurse, a hunter, and a guard. She used the mare to drag firewood. She set snares, catching small rabbits, boiling the meat into a thin broth that she forced between his cracked lips. He was too weak to lift his head. The wound in his shoulder, the one from Maddox, was healing. It was clean. But the one from Slade, it was angry. It wept. She knew the bullet was still inside. She knew it was killing him. On the 10th day, the fever spiked. He was delirious again, his body shaking. She knew he would not survive another night. She took the whiskey the woman from the camp had given her. She took his skinning knife, the one he had sharpened in the cabin. She held the blade in the hottest part of their small fire until the steel glowed a dull, faint red. He was unconscious. She knelt beside him. She prayed to her God. She prayed to his gods. She prayed to the mountain, the rock, the wind. "Forgive me," she whispered. She poured the whiskey over the wound, washing it clean. She took the hot knife. She did not hesitate. She was the woman who had fired the revolver. She cut into his flesh. He screamed, a sound that tore the silence of the desert. He arched, his body fighting her, but he was too weak. She held him down, her knee on his good shoulder. She probed the wound, her fingers slick with his blood. She felt it, a small, hard lump of lead, lodged against a rib. She used the tip of the knife. She dug it out. It fell onto the blanket with a wet, heavy sound. He was silent. He had fainted from the pain. She poured the last of the whiskey into the raw, open wound. She packed it with the last of the yarrow paste. She stitched it closed with a needle and thread from her own mending kit. She collapsed, her body soaked in his sweat and his blood. She had done all she could. She slept. When she woke, the sun was high. He was cool. He was breathing. It was a shallow, even breath. The fever had broken. He was gaunt. He was a skeleton, but he was alive. They stayed in that shelter for another month. The world outside did not exist. There was only the shelter, the mare, the hunt for food, and the slow, agonizing process of healing. He began to sit up. He began to eat. He watched her. He watched her leave in the morning with his rifle and return in the afternoon with a rabbit. He watched her tend the fire, her hands capable and strong. He saw no fear in her. He saw no weakness. His body was broken, but his spirit was changing. The shame that had driven him into isolation felt distant. It was a smaller thing now. He had been the ghost of the canyon, a man hiding from his failures. But this woman, this Atsika, she had faced her monster. She had not hidden. She had walked back into the fire. He had spent his life defined by the massacre he could not stop. He was realizing his life was being redefined by the one person he had, just barely, managed to save. When he was strong enough to sit on the mare, they left. They did not go south. They did not go to Mexico. They went home. They went back to the Hidden Box Canyon. The cabin was as they had left it, cold, silent. The three-legged dog was gone. He had waited, and they had not returned. Talon stood in the doorway, leaning on a stick. The loss of the dog was a fresh grief. It was the end of his old life. Clara took his hand. "We will build again," she said. The news from Red Creek came slowly. It came on the wind. It came from a Navajo boy who had seen the Exodus. With Wyatt Slade dead, his empire of fear and debt dissolved overnight. The sheriff, his puppet, had disappeared before the sun came up. Slade's hired guns, unpaid, looted the company store and rode out. The miners, who had been trapped by debt, suddenly realized there was no one to stop them. They were free. They took what tools they could carry, and they walked away. Red Creek, the bustling, violent camp, was a ghost town within a week. But not everyone left. The women, the children, the old men, the ones who had nowhere else to go. They remained, starving in the shells of the shacks. Clara heard this, and she knew her work was not done. Talon was still weak. He spent his days in the sun by the cabin, regaining his strength. But his eyes were different. The ghosts were quieter. Clara took the mare. She loaded her with dried meat, with cornmeal from Talon's store. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To Red Creek," she said. "It is a dangerous place." "Not anymore," she said. "It is just a hungry place." She rode into the dead camp. The women who had hidden from her, who had whispered about her, came out of their shacks. They looked at her, this woman who had killed Slade. She did not speak of the fight. She did not speak of the blood. She opened the saddlebags. She divided the food. She went to the cook tent where she had once worked. She went to the small, abandoned shack that had belonged to her father. She found his Bible. The next day, she gathered the children. There were perhaps a dozen of them. White, Mexican, some half-breeds, all of them thin, all of them with old eyes. She sat them in the dirt, in the shadow of the silent saloon. She opened the book. "This is an A," she said, drawing a letter in the dust. She began to teach. She was not just teaching them to read. She was teaching them that the world was not just violence and greed. She was building a bridge. Talon watched. He healed. His body mended slowly. The wound in his gut would always be a puckered, angry scar, but his stride became strong again. He saw what she was doing. He saw her ride to the camp every day. He saw the life she was breathing into the ashes of Slade's world. And his shame finally broke. He was not a ghost. He was a Dine. He was a protector. He had not been able to save his clan, but he could save this one, this new, broken, strange clan of women and children. He rode out, not to the camp. He rode up into the high canyons. He rode for 3 days. He found the scattered families of his people, the ones hiding, the ones who lived in fear of men like Slade, of men like Maddox. He spoke to them. He spoke not as a ghost, but as Talon Redhawk. He told them of the man who was dead. He told them of the camp that was free. He told them of the white woman who was teaching the children. At first, they did not believe him, but they saw the change in his eyes. The guilt was gone. There was purpose. He proposed a trade. The women in the camp were mending clothes. They had needles. They had thread. The town had flour. It had salt. His people had blankets. They had horses. They had knowledge of the land, of the herbs that could heal. He brought the two worlds together. The first meeting was at the San Juan River, at the place where he had first seen her. It was neutral ground. 2 Navajo elders came, their faces like carved rock. Clara came, with the woman from the cook tent. They did not speak the same language, but Talon stood between them. He was the bridge. He translated. He bartered. He made peace. The women from the camp traded needles and coffee for thick, warm blankets. The Navajo traded herbs for iron pots. It was not a nation. It was a start. Talon knew the peace was fragile. The desert was still full of scavengers, the men who had worked for Slade, the men who had attacked Clara in the arroyo. He formed a watch. He spoke to the strongest of the Navajo hunters. He spoke to the few decent men who had stayed in the ruins of Red Creek, the stable hand, a few miners who had families. They were not soldiers. They were guardians. They patrolled the borders of the valley, not to keep people out, but to keep the violence out. They were Navajo and white, riding together. The hunting of men in this valley had stopped. Talon's dream, the one he had confessed in his fever, was no longer a dream. It was just life. The hidden cabin in the Box Canyon had served its purpose. It was a place of hiding. It was a place of healing. It was not a home. "We will build by the river," he said to Clara one evening as the sun set. "Yes," she said. They chose the spot, on a high bank, overlooking the wide, clear water, shaded by the same ancient cottonwoods where he had first seen her. They built it together. He was strong again. He cut the thick, sturdy cottonwood logs. He quarried the stone from the cliff face. She was his partner. She mixed the mud and straw for the chinking, sealing the walls against the wind. It was not a cabin. It was a house. It had 2 rooms. It had a real glass window, salvaged from Slade's opulent office. They built a community. The ruins of Red Creek were slowly repopulated. But it was not a mining camp. It was a town. The women and men who had been saved by Clara's school and Talon's watch, they stayed. They built. Their new house by the river became a center. Clara planted flowers in the rich, dark soil by the riverbank. She planted seeds she had traded for, bright, impossible colors, yellow and red and blue, a shock of defiant life against the red rock. Talon taught the children. He took the Navajo boys and the white boys from the new town, and he taught them. He taught them how to read the tracks of a deer. He taught them how to fletch an arrow, how to pull the string, how to respect the life they were taking. He taught them the stories. He sat them by the fire, and he told them the stories of the Dean, of the first man and the first woman, of the long walk, of the shame, and of the survival. He was giving his past to them, not as a burden, but as a lesson. One evening, Clara stood by the door, watching him. He was standing with a small, white boy, his hand correcting the boy's grip on the bow. He was patient. He was smiling. He looked up. He saw her watching. He walked to her. He stood before her, this man who had been a ghost. He looked at the flowers she had planted. He looked at the house they had built. He looked at her. The isolation was broken. The silence was filled with the voices of children. The desert, once a place of exile, was now a home. It was a community, born from the ashes of 2 broken lives, held together by a thread of impossible hope. 10 years passed. The wind still scoured the high canyons, and the sun still baked the red earth. The San Juan River still ran its course, a silver thread of life. The land did not change, but the people did. The year was 1885. The camp known as Red Creek was gone. The name itself was a fading scar, a story told by the old-timers. In its place, a town had grown. It was not a boom town, built on greed and whiskey. It was a quiet town, built of cottonwood logs and sturdy sandstone. It was built on the foundations of a schoolhouse and a trading post. The streets were wide. The houses had yards, children's laughter. A sound that had never been heard in the days of Wyatt Slade was now as common as the cry of the hawks. They had changed the name. They called it Hope Crossing. On the high mesa that overlooked the town, the one where Talon used to keep his lonely watch, there now stood a single, tall marker. It was not marble, imported from the east. It was a column of the same red sandstone as the cliffs, solid, rough-hewn, and permanent. It did not mark a battle. It did not mourn a death. It marked a beginning. Clara stood there often, her hand resting on the stone, which was warm from the afternoon sun. The words cut into it were simple. They were in English. Freedom is home. Beneath them, the same sentiment was carved in the sharp, clear symbols of the Dine. Talon had carved them himself. It was the first and only monument in the territory that spoke 2 languages. It was a bridge made of stone. Clara was 33 years old. The haunted, hunted look was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. Her hands, which had once been soft and useless, were now strong and capable. She was the town's teacher. She was its heart. She sat at the table in their house. It was not the small, hidden cabin in the box canyon. That place had been reclaimed by the wilderness. This was the house they had built together, on the high bank above the river, shaded by the cottonwoods. It was solid. It was safe. The glass window, salvaged from Slade's office, looked out over her garden, a defiant patch of bright yellow and deep blue flowers. She was writing. Her father's Bible was on a shelf, but the book in her hands was a thick, leather-bound journal. The pages were filled with her neat, clear script. She was not writing sermons. She was writing their history. She wrote about the girl by the river, the one who was freezing and terrified. She wrote about the man who had offered a blanket, who had taught her to hold a rifle. She wrote about the high, terrible ridge, the thirst, the taste of snake meat, the sound of the gunshots in the arroyo. She wrote about the blood in the stable, the dying fever in the rain, and the fight for his life. She was writing it all down, sparing no detail, so that the children in her school, the ones who had been born in this valley of peace, would know what it had cost. She was writing it so that the past would not be forgotten. She was writing it for the future. Talon was by the river. He was 42. The years had been kind. The lines on his face were deeper, but they were not from shame. They were from sunlight, from thought, from the occasional, rare smile. The ghosts that had haunted him were quiet. He was no longer the ghost. He was a leader, a mediator, a man respected by the new white settlers and by his own people, the Daini. He was a father. He was with their son. The boy was 8 years old. He was lean and strong, with his mother's lighter brown hair that streaked blonde in the sun. But he had his father's eyes, dark, intelligent, and still, he sat on a small, mottled pony, his bare feet dangling. Talon was adjusting the boy's grip on the reins. "The water is fast today," Talon said, his voice the same low, steady calm he had always used. "But you are not afraid of it?" "No, father," the boy said, though his knuckles were white. "The river is alive," Talon said. He was not just teaching him to ride. He was teaching him to see. It is not your enemy. You do not fight it. You listen to it. You feel where the current is strong and where it is weak. You let the horse find its footing. You become part of the water. He put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Never forget who you are. You are the son of your mother. You are Dine. You are of the red running into the water clan. You are of both. This is not a weakness. It is your strength. Now, go." The boy nodded, his face serious. He nudged the pony with his heels. The small horse stepped cautiously into the churning, silver water. He stumbled, found his footing, and began to swim, the boy moving with him. Talon watched him, his chest tight with a love so fierce it was a physical ache. He watched his son, the future, cross the river to the other side. Later that day, in the warm, long light of the late afternoon, Clara was at the riverbank. It was the same spot, the flat stones, the ancient cottonwoods, the sound of the water rushing past. She was kneeling, a basket of laundry beside her. She was washing. She was humming a small tune. She was not scrubbing at a single, blood-stained garment. She was washing her son's small shirt, her husband's linen tunic. The water was clear. Her flowers grew in a wild, bright tangle all the way down to the bank. She heard a sound behind her, a moccasin on the soft earth. She did not startle. She did not jump. She did not reach for a knife. She smiled. She turned her head. He was standing there. Talon. He was tall, his shadow stretching long in the afternoon light. He was not the warrior who had emerged from the trees. He was her husband. He walked to her. He did not speak. He knelt beside her on the stone. She looked at him. The love she felt was a quiet, steady thing, as deep and as constant as the river itself. He looked at her, the woman he had found, a broken, weeping thing, the woman who was now the center of his world. He reached out. He did not take the laundry. He took her wet hands. He held them, his own scarred, strong hands enveloping hers. He lifted them from the water. He leaned in. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, of fire. It was a kiss of peace, of promise, of 10 years of shared life. He pulled back, but he still held her hands. He looked at the river, then at her. His smile was quiet. It was complete. The desert was no longer lonely. The high, empty space that had once echoed with silence and grief was now filled with the sound of a town, of a school, of a boy calling to his pony. The desert was no longer a wilderness, a place of exile. It was a home. The desert was not lonely, not when two hearts had learned to share it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let us know where you are listening from in the comments below. We love to hear your thoughts and share in the experience. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, like this video, and support us further by pressing the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.